Yes. More, bring me more. What up, Bone Ponies? Welcome back to the Tabletop Totality Podcast. My name is Cody, and I'm here with my friends,
Steven?
and
And Neil.
you went redundant on the and.
Dude, it's not my fault. I was supposed to say the and. You were just not supposed to say anything, you know?
But I want to keep talking.
It's all right.
Always.
I'll let you have it now.
Mommy and Daddy, stop fighting, please.
So today we are talking about the power of names. And this is going to pertain to not only just your tabletop role playing games, but really just your stories, your world building, anything you're trying to do. I am somebody that's played role playing games for probably over 20 years. I am a writer. I enjoy world building, and I feel that I like to take a lot of time to ensure that my names have uh, not just the meaning, but really that there's a reason for the naming of things. And by that I mean kind of like the history of it.
Mhm.
And I feel like adding that history, adding that backstory to a name or to like a family or anything like that, it really kind of helps, I think, expand upon your world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you guys are both my Toleraxia campaign, and you guys have experienced. There's a house in the north called House Olfang,
Yep.
and you guys have experienced members of House Olfang and the consequences of their actions throughout time. So not just your present moment, but there's members of this house that are historically, famous, and famous generals or famous knights and things like that. So when you guys hear of Olfang, like there's such a bigger connection.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
Do you guys do anything similar in your campaigns or when you come to for your writing?
Yeah, I kind of think that it's important to sort of have like that backstory for your locations. I mean, it's not just important to have if you're playing a game and you have a character that has a backstory, like that's important, but the places that you have should also have, backstory, and the names of places that you create should have just as much of a rich backstory to them as the characters that you create. For example, there's a city in the world that I've been working on called Vank, and it's named that because hundreds of years ago there was a party of heroes that saved the world called the Vanquishers, and they
Mhm.
basically set up shop in that city, and
Gotcha.
basically made them name the city after them for what they had done.
Did they
So
shut them down, open up shop?
you
Mm.
know it.
That's
Gotcha.
I feel like the only way to really
Right.
be a party
Right.
of Cult of Vanquishers, right? That's what
Right.
the name. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
it's the only way.
But yeah, like stuff like that is like an easy way to be like, oh, like who's a local hero, or what's a local group that has had a lot of pull in this
Yeah.
area over the
Well,
course of history, and then you can name stuff after that.
that's something even that we're doing in the Thistledown
Correct.
setting.
Yeah.
We have Lake Orin, and Lake Orin is named after a hero who
Yeah,
who
exactly.
perished in the area.
Yep.
So that's a good way too to kind of flesh out your world a little bit more, but also, like we said, give that, I guess, maybe give a little bit more inherent meaning, not a literal meaning, but a reverence to the
Hmm.
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. I think that's the big aspect of a lot of naming when it comes to world building in general is now you're giving that depth more to your world. Yeah, it could be this is what it looks like. It's beautiful architecture, but if it has a name reference to something that your party is either going to continuously deal with or had to deal with for a good amount of time, and they can see that tie, it's going to draw them in more. And that name is what does that. If it's some random name that you thought of, it's not going to hold that same validity
Yeah,
as
yeah.
like what Olfang does for us in that in Toleraxia, or what Vank would do
Yeah.
for other people in your world once they learn about these vanquishers and this party.
Yeah.
Now it's gonna, oh, okay, this makes sense. They must have been really great people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, like, you can use random names, but if you give that random name a meaning in your world,
Yeah.
then it actually matters. Like, Olfang doesn't really mean anything, but it means something in Toleraxia
Mm.
because it was given meaning, and it could just be that Cody thought of that name and was like, that's a cool sounding word. I'll just make that into the place, and then it's like, well, now I need to give meaning to this word. So developing that is like also a cool way to like flesh out your world even more.
Well,
Yeah.
that is something that I would that is something that I could bring up. I think is our second point. I feel personally that I try to name things so that there is a hidden meaning or at
Yep.
least a root meaning. So for me, Olfang, I remember. So Ulf, for the Norse is a wolf,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and then so Olfang, just it's a double, it's a
Yeah.
double meaning, and that's why they have on their crest they have the wolf,
Wolf.
and
Yep.
they have the wolf pelt. They're famous for wearing these big wolf pelt cloaks,
Hmm.
um, which you can also find on our website for free.
Mm. Oh, bow, bow,
Not
bow.
not the pelts, but an item for
Right,
Dungeons and
right,
Dragons. We're not
right.
giving away. We're not giving away free
We
wolf
do not
pelts.
have wolf pelts for
Not
free
yet. Not
or at
yet.
all yet. So in my homebrew world of Toleraxia, I so named it because of so two words.
Hmm.
Totalitarian came to mind, and the other word is axiology. Um, this setting is one that's there's perpetual war. There's a lot of hidden evils. There's a lot of puppetry
Mhm.
from
Hmm.
insidious beings.
Yep.
So the noun axiology is not maybe so apparent as totalitarian because of all the war, but it means about the valuation of things. So what's valuable, what's acceptable, what's sought after. So for this setting in particular, you guys are starting to find that you're starting to have to pick and choose between what it really matters in the world, what fire you're trying to run to go put out,
Yep.
what battle you're willing to go and fight for, because you see that a lot of these things are kind of inconsequential, or they're not going to make a difference in the end.
Yeah.
And I feel like you guys are starting to have to make those decisions. So I jumbled those two words together and came up with Toleraxia.
Yep.
Okay.
So not only does it sound like it fits, but it has a meaning behind it that makes it fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that Tolkien really is the
Oh,
master of
my
this.
boy.
And I think that's why so Sauron, when he was the necromancer in Mirkwood, his fortress is Dol Guldur, which is the hill of sorcery.
Hmm.
And so that's awesome. And Tolkien chose to name it Dol Guldur with the meaning of hill of sorcery instead of Happy Hill or Sunshine Place.
Or even, just random words. You know what
Right,
I
Yeah.
mean? He
right.
he took that thought to have, let me, yes, to somebody who is maybe reading this for the first time, they won't realize this, but the more and more they look or delve into my world, the more and more they'll see. And
Hmm.
I think that is a great aspect of naming. So that's kind of what I was referencing prior, was, yeah, you can still make a name mean something for your world even if it just sounds good. But I know I'm a big proponent to, I will go and I'll go right on to Google Translate sometimes, and I'll just
Hmm.
start looking at words, and I'll
Yep.
start combining words together. I'll be like, what does vicious mean in this language, and then what does hard thinking mean in this language, and now I'm gonna blend those words together, and this is because this is what I want this culture, this person to kind of give off, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's very similar to how Wizards explains tiefling names. They decide to pick a name after certain tieflings will be named after certain attributes of themselves.
Right, or like a virtue
Or
or
yeah, or a
whatever.
certain
Yeah.
virtue.
Law.
Or
Well,
yeah.
I think it's with ASMR, it's more virtues. I think with tieflings, it's more based around like flaws or oh, I forgot the word. But yeah, it's more of like a negative connotation for
Way to just
tiefling.
be hating on the tieflings, bro.
I love tieflings, man. I love tieflings. Like
But
my
yeah,
favorite
like
race in the game, but you know.
using that to not just like that is its absolute base value, right? Is just all right, my guy's a brute, so his name's gonna be Brute.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
the good old if we have anime fans here, Berserker.
Yeah,
So we're gonna
Yeah.
name our main character Guts because he just doesn't care. He's
yeah. He's a big dumb sword man.
yeah,
Yep.
so his name's just Guts.
Yeah.
But that's yeah, it's fine to do it that way, and you can always do it that way, but sometimes adding that extra little bit makes it easier also for you to create your world. So now if you have a city that has this illustrious name that you know the meaning for as the overlord, well, think about how much easier it is now for you to create all of the things for that city.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things I did even for for Talaraxes. I thought about the attributes of like my individual, like my pantheon of gods,
Hmm.
and then in the language that I chose to use, I tried to get words that meant these attributes and make names from them.
Yep.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I'm always a big fan of Google Translate and changing up words a little bit in order to name stuff.
Yeah.
Like like I wanted to start making a campaign for newer players, and so I created a little village for them to start off in. And so in order to figure out a name for this place, I looked up the word for player on
Mhm.
Google Translate and came to the Latin word ludio. So the players, because they're new players, are starting in the town of New Ludio, which
That's
is
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, like that's like a really
Like so you get
cool
to
thing
see
in it.
simple stuff like that. I'm sure that there's a million new
is
Ludios
this
out
town
there.
is this town near like a forest or anything?
It is. It's near a swamp actually.
Oh, do they have walls?
Um they might. They might
Okay,
not.
all right.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Keep
But yeah,
stay in tune.
yeah. Yeah, but then like there's another city in that world called Inianu, and this sort of also goes back to the history thing. The reason it's called that is because it's a city that was founded by a collaboration between humans and orcs,
Mhm.
and it was sort of designed as a place for like monstrous races to come together with human races to sort of have a new start, a fresh start for them to like sort of come together as like a collective group instead of just being like fighting all the time. And so the name Inianu comes from the word anew and also some orcish word meaning basically the same thing from an online dictionary that I have not been able to find since I found that word.
Yeah,
Really
that'll
kills
happen.
me because I really wish that I could. And then like as far as like naming for like tiefling, like we were talking about tieflings with the flaws and stuff, like that I don't know if that naming convention is something that Cody just came up with for his world or if that's like a general thing for tieflings like all
No,
around.
that's something that Wizards has done,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I don't follow the like you were saying before, like oh like Asimar have like more like virtuous names and
Hmm.
Tieflings maybe take like flaws. So I have Hubris,
Yeah.
who's an NPC. Well, his parents were Avarice and Joy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
So
they
just
just pick
general attributes
yeah they
for
just pick a
yeah.
general attribute and then that's it.
Cool. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like for my tieflings, I have two tieflings that I've created, and uh, they are Bludge and Avari. And Avari, actually, her name comes from avarice
Hmm.
because she is greedy. She has a lot of money and she spends it on anything that she can, basically as an impulse. So she is a lot of avarice there. And then Bludge is named that because he was created to be like this ultimate warrior. He was like an experiment to become like the most powerful, the like half demon fighter in the world. So his name comes from the word bloodshed.
Yeah.
So so yeah, like
Yeah,
so
it's a really
that's
good way to do it. I
yeah.
like that.
So yeah,
Um,
so that way it's not as
so
obvious.
Mhm.
Avi. So, so I guess for my third point, I'd like to bring up. So in a lot of the different mediums I've read in science fiction and fantasy, really more so in fantasy, a true name, somebody's true name or an item's true name holds a lot of power.
Mhm.
So off the top of my head, I know Ursula K. Le Guin. She did Earthsea, and I remember that in Earthsea, everybody had to have like multiple fake names, and you weren't supposed to share your real name with anybody because if they had it, they could manipulate you.
Mhm.
Mhm.
In Patrick Rothfuss, he's got the King Killer Chronicles, which I love. Uh, a true name of something like fire or wind can be called upon to control it to make it do incredible and terrible things at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't really do that so much myself, like in my homebrew settings. Maybe more so for like planar, like extra planar beings.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and that's
your hells and all
yeah.
that. I try to do more so of that. But I do give it more credit when I'm playing Call of Cthulhu
Okay.
because I think in Call of Cthulhu, like to follow Lovecraft, I like Lovecraft's writing. Lovecraft was a shitty racist, but I like his writing.
Mhm.
For as far as the fiction goes,
Mhm.
and his monsters, the whole crux of the fear of his monsters is that they are so unknown, so foreign, so inconceivable that we cannot comprehend them.
Mhm.
That it drives us mad.
Right.
So when they have a name, if they have a true name, or they call something, by a phrase, I feel like that's important. I feel like it's powerful.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I try to play up to that. But as far as like for like D&D, I don't do it so much. But I was wondering, do you guys do something similar?
So besides my giggle at inconceivable because I was watching The Princess Bride recently.
Give me your real names.
um I was actually the first time that I was ever introduced to this aspect, this idea of true names, and that is where your power comes from, or kind of where your power lies, was actually from a video game from the Nintendo 64 called Aiden Chronicles.
Good game.
Great game, honestly completely underrated for its time, but also had some flaws, and I can't honestly recognize those flaws because I just like the game so much. But in that game, the whole premise is your true name. Because you start off as a character who his naming ceremony did not get completed. And through that, he gets enormous power, and he's allowed to cast spells of any school, he's allowed to take anything he truly wishes because no name was ever given to him, that power was never given to him, but now he has access to it all. But if he doesn't get truly named, he will end up going mad, is ends up what the long story short ends up being, because this game is actually a very long game and has a lot of different twists and turns to it. But that aspect I've always loved, and I think that's kind of why I've always gone into this aspect. Like if I'm naming, especially one of my characters, first thing I like think of is like, all right, kind of how do they want to be if I'm not naming it specifically towards like some character that I liked in some novel or something like that. Um, but it was just that aspect of, you know, if you're not truly named, then yeah, you get this like huge amount of power, but you'll end up, becoming the undoing of the world almost because you didn't, because that's not how it should be. It's almost like a binding ritual to everything in the world.
Hmm.
So I always thought that aspect was like really awesome, and then especially when anytime I'm playing like anything like Dungeons and Dragons or I think I even did it in Pathfinder. I kept that aspect, like anything that's
Blech.
fiendish or demonic. it their true name is held sacred because then you can control them. If you know their true name, you
Right.
you now own them and their power. It's like what is it? Who used to do that? Rumpelstiltskin, was it? He also had like in in that
In
whole thing, his
in this
true
story,
name,
yeah.
yeah, in his story, that is another story about
Yeah.
names being power.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I've always liked it. I've always thought it was a very interesting concept. I don't use it as much as I think it could be like used for,
Hmm.
but it's always been interesting to me.
Yeah, I think probably one of my favorite ones is Stephen King, the Storm of the Century, the
Hmm.
movie. The villain, the evil wizard, shows up, and his name is Andre Lenoge. That's what he tells everybody. Is my name is Andre Lenoge. And it's not until later on that they realize that it's an anagram for "I am Legion,"
Hmm. Yeah.
and it was like, and then it blew everybody's mind. So I thought that was a good one. And then similarly, you were talking about a nameless character, and it just shot into my head. In Clint Eastwood's the spaghetti westerns,
Hmm.
he was always in the good, the bad, and the ugly, and a few dollars more, fistful of dollars, all that. He was the man with no name.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So everybody else was, Tuco, whatever. He had no name, and
Hmm.
people called him a bunch of different stuff, but it almost gave him like it gave him like advantage on intimidation
Exactly. Yeah. No,
because
and
when he
that's
rolled in, like everybody was like who the hell
mm,
is this guy?
nobody
Yeah,
knows his name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
and just still have a reputation and not have like a name
A
or anything like
name.
that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It was cool.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah, I like the idea of true names a lot. I think that it's a really cool thing, like Cody said, for like extraplanar beings, like specifically for like demons and devils and angels and things like that. There is an aspect to it in like material plane stuff that I have done for some of my characters. Specifically for the children of those two tieflings that I talked about earlier. Are characters that I call Scarlet and Rose Blackhorn. And those aren't their real names. They're just I like to name my characters after the color red. Um, like which like the shirt which you can purchase on our website. And
Yeah.
after I don't even know how many
after how
crimsons
many?
Steve
Yeah,
has had.
yeah. I
Yeah,
was
I
like,
can
yeah.
attest.
I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll change it up and see if it changes. But those aren't their actual names. They have names that are more akin to like actual tiefling names, but they don't tell anybody those.
Yeah.
If you find out what their name is, it's like they don't tell you what their names are unless you're like really close to them, and then they're like, yeah, this is what I'm actually called because they'd rather be called by these other names. But like if you're really like I feel like that's sort of a thing too. Is like if somebody really cares about you and really wants to trust you with a secret, like them having a
Yeah.
fake name and then revealing their real name to you is like a huge way of actually doing that as sort of like a development thing for like a character as a relationship with another character. Is it's like, oh yeah, you've known me like this, like everyone does for so long, but actually I actually have a different name and it's this, and you know it. Don't tell anybody because this is for you.
Yeah.
So that could be another thing that you could do in terms of like true names and things is like even with normal non magical entities whose name has like if you know their name you can control them. It's like it's more of like a thing of trust than
Mhm.
anything else.
Yeah.
I think it's a thing for the Fae too. Is like you like
Yeah,
don't accept an offer from like a Fae being, or don't tell a
yeah,
Fae being your name
yeah,
because
yeah. That's a
yeah,
yeah.
they can trick you
They'll
further.
they'll spirit it away you and make you work in a bathhouse
Oh
for a
yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. That's right. I knew there was something else that I was thinking of that does that.
Yeah.
What was
Oh
that?
yeah. I mean,
That was that
that's a
movie.
lot of Celtic. There's a lot of
Yeah,
Celtic lore about that too. The fairies and the Fae. I mean,
yeah.
they'll just trick you
Yeah.
out of house and home,
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
Well, we also like me and my brothers. We also used to joke about like your middle name is like your CIA name. You don't give out your middle name because that's what you use when you're a CIA agent. You know?
Wow.
Yeah, 'cause you can't hand that
Okay.
out.
Oh boy. All right. So for the last point I was going to bring up, um, I was thinking about the actual language,
Mhm.
and I think that again, uh, I'm I'm on the team Tolkien all the way. And if you couldn't tell by my Rohan flag behind here, um,
Mhm.
that Tolkien, not only did he come up with meaning for all of his places, and he came up for history for these places, he also came up with the friggin' languages for the
Yep.
people that were
Mhm.
living in these places and going through these events.
Mhm.
And so he made sure that everything fit, and
Mhm.
that's like that to me. That's the extent, like that's the furthest extent of world building, and
Yeah.
then where he came down to. I mean, that's like your bare bones of any sort of civilization or society is the method of communication,
Mhm.
is that language. And so he made sure that there was like a whole culture and everything behind that.
Yeah.
And that's a huge task. And I
Mhm.
don't know many people that are up to doing that.
Mhm.
And I know that as I have poured a lot of time into some of my worlds, when you do that and maybe people don't see or they don't appreciate those things, it can get frustrating.
Mhm.
Um, but also, it can be very tiring to do all that. So, in a lesser extent, I think that George R. R. Martin is kind of like he kind of does it a little bit, just as so far it is that he likes to play with the English language as far as his spelling of places,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and he likes to switch out a lot of I's and E's for Y's. That's something that I adopted in Talaraxia because I thought that's like an
Yep.
easy
Mhm.
language thing that it's like, yep, this is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I also tried to make a lot of names almost sound like semi-biblical, but also names that sound like Talaraxian names
Mhm.
that have that that complexity.
That's similar formatting.
Yeah. Um, so I think that Martin is probably on the lower end of that spectrum, but he still is a quick way of changing somebody's name,
Oh yeah.
quite easily,
Yeah.
just by swapping out, some easy letters and making something unique.
Mhm.
Whereas Tolkien is the far end of,
Yeah. Oh
hey, I
yeah.
made my own languages because I didn't like the English language enough. you know.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's daunting to try and think I want a brand new language for this group, but the beauty of that is, so even if you look at wizards, so they have different dialects, but a lot of these dialects will share the same phonetical alphabet. Not phonetical, but they'll share the same alphabet. So if you have dwarven, well, giants also use dwarven as their written language, but giant is different than speaking dwarvish.
And I also think that orcs use Dwarven as
Exactly.
their script, but spoken orc is different.
Is different. So
Yeah.
it's no different than the rest of the languages in our world. So you have, Spanish and Italian, very similar. Can they have a conversation between each other? just barely. They'll be able to talk to each other, but it's no different than also like Ukrainian and Russian. But the actual written language is different.
Hmm.
So to do that even in your own world is don't even just think about the in the aspect of tabletop RPGs, don't think about just the aspect of common and changing that up, which is our English. Think about it as, all right, I'm gonna make a bridge between Elvish and Dwarven, and this is what my society speaks. So now you have the written letters for it. Now you still have that language, what you would need to create your own language, but you didn't really create anything. You didn't have to go through and say, all right,
You can
this is
start
what
from
an A looks
scratch. Yeah,
like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is what it sounds
yeah.
like in the dialect. You know.
So there's 2 points I want to piggyback on. That you talked about, like the alphabet. That's something that I've done as well, where
Hmm.
Hmm.
I came up with 26 letters that I made up, but they basically work like English, and that's just for the use of us English speaking people at the
Yep.
table.
Hmm.
So when I spell out a word with these new alphabet, it's basically just a cipher for English, but it still added that element of, okay, here's a foreign people with their own language, and it adds to their identity, which is the
Exactly.
second point of what I was trying to say about the name, the language, all that. That is your identity. um
Hmm.
so that is a big, even as far as, maybe not outside the tabletop games, but even just like for writing, for making your own story, or for anything that you're trying to build, you should make it like, it's kind of like a hillbilly reference, but it's like things are better when they cook in their own, like in their own juices. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
No.
like, like when I make this small town for my novel that I have, right? The town's called Phaeton, and that's kind of a weird name, but
Hmm.
there's a reason why it's named after. It's named because of this reverend that founded the town,
Hmm.
like way back when.
Yeah.
Like this like Jesuit that founded the town, and it's like that's why it's named that way. And
Hmm.
then there's all sorts of like, oh, like I keep coming up with like common street addresses, or I make it like a familiar thing, so that when people are talking about places, it doesn't sound like this far out crazy place. I never tell you where Phaeton is. I never name a state. You know it's in
Hmm.
America. You know it's in the 80s, but you don't know what state it is. You don't know what city it's next to. I
Yeah.
did that on purpose because it's any town America. That's the point.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's the identity. I don't have to sit there and be like, "Yep, they're all West Virginians." No,
Yeah. Right.
they're
Yeah.
from Phaeton. That's just it.
Yeah.
That's like Stephen King's Castle Rock.
Yep.
Everything, Castle Rock's the place to be. Or Derry.
Yeah. Right.
Hmm. Yeah. And when it comes to like naming places, something that I've started doing for my world is just naming.
You're
Pla-
concerning me. You're concerning me because you keep talking about your world and your stories. Our comrade.
Damn.
I'm sorry. I'm
He
sorry,
talks
guy. Who just,
about
I'm sorry, guy who just talked about his own
his
novel for
own
5 minutes.
novels, his own worlds. Yeah, we're not
When
allowed
it,
to
when it,
have own worlds, Steve.
when is Phaeton dropping on the website, Cody?
That's right. That's right. After my novel's released.
But anyway, something that I've started doing is just naming places by basically just taking the names of places that actually exist in the real world and just changing them
Mhm.
slightly, like to alter them. Because in a fantasy world, real world locations don't exist. They don't. They aren't
Yeah.
there. So the etymology of them like doesn't really matter. So you can take words from any language or languages and mash them together
Mhm.
and doesn't mean anything because it's a fantasy world. It doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Yeah.
So like for example, this the country there we're going to be doing a live stream after we record this sometime, and it takes place where you guys are going to be going up against a group of people from a country called Inevrios, and Enevrios is the name of Enevrios is based off of Denver. So I took
They have everything in
They
Denver.
have everything in Denver.
Denver.
It has everything. I'm
Oh
sorry.
man.
What do you want? So yeah. So I took the D off of Denver. I switched around
No,
the
you put
second
the D
E.
in Denver.
Oh.
You know it, baby. I took the second E and the V and I flipped them around, and then I added iOS to the end, and so I got Enevrios because that sounds like a fantasy place.
That's shit.
So I was like, I mean, yeah. It's like what is the etymology of Denver? I don't know. It doesn't matter because it doesn't.
Fantasy writing so easy, even Steve can do it.
Exactly.
Damn.
Exactly.
Damn.
But yeah, it's just
how
that.
could you do that to my boy?
Look how they massacred my boy.
But yeah, even for someone like me that has like almost no experience, it's that simple. You just take the name of a place, you tweak it a little bit, and then there you go. You've got your country or whatever.
It's about the flavor, folks. It's about the flavor. You got to put your own spices in the pot.
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here and tell you all different types of ways, but it's whatever works for you guys, and hopefully you like some of our tips. Personally, I will always try and plant hitting meanings in a lot of my cities, or even like naming cultures. Like, what is this culture known for? Oh, they ride horses all the time. Well, let's take a look at all these type of breakdowns we can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just personally makes it a lot easier for me when I get a name locked in, and especially when I name that way, because now I'm like, all right, this is kind of the pinnacle of their society. What else would stem from that? I have a place to start and go.
Right.
And I think that's part of the hardest thing to do with anything you're creating is, what am I creating?
Yeah, and that's some of the stuff that we talked about even like in the world building episode. And we were saying, don't get intimidated where you think that you have to be, Tolkien, and you have to sit there and create this massive thousands of years worth of history and mythology. You don't have to do that. And that's, if you want to do that, if you're capable of doing that, then yes, you should. But if you don't feel that you have to do that, don't feel that that's going to keep you from playing and having fun, because you can do a lot of simple things that we just talked about, and your players will come and sit down and they will leave thinking that they have gone to your world, that they haven't gone to Faerun. They didn't go to wherever, they went to your setting.
Yep.
And things, a name and language, things like that it's all part of the identity of your setting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really the big part of it. But yeah.
So you get out there and you get naming.
Naming.
And I'll tell you one thing though, if you don't name a bone pony, you're gonna have an aggressive little bone pony for the rest of your life.
Well, yeah, like it's the whole idea of naming ships.
That's right.
If you don't name your ship, you're gonna have bad luck.
That's true. That's true.
That's another thing that
That's how you get a dark marrow, man.
Yeah, you don't want them dark marrow bone ponies.
No.
They're dangerous.
Well, folks,
they'll ride you into the ground.
I'm uncomfortable.
Jeez.
Yeah, always didn't mean anything by it. Just
all right,
your minds went there.
Yeah, we're done here now, folks. Podcast is over.
Yeah.
I gotta go brush my teeth.
Gross.
He put a bad taste in my mouth.
You just made it 10 times worse by saying that.
All right, we just gotta wrap this up. We gotta wrap this one up.
We'll see you at the Rich Bone Ponies.
Well, definitely thank you for listening. Hopefully, let us know what you're thinking in the
Like, comment, and
comments.
subscribe for more of this amazing content.
Oh my gosh. I just like and subscribe if you don't want to see this anymore. Like, just that bad end content.
You could also bribe us on our Patreon to just
Yeah,
stop making content, and we will do that.
that's true.
Or no, not to make,
Or
at the,
make content.
or at the very least, stop content like this.
Yeah,
Right,
stop this end content. Stop this
Yeah.
end
You too can
madness.
prevent Steven from saying things that make me uncomfortable.
No, you can't.
For
No,
as
you
little as
can't.
$1.
You can't.
It'll never stop.
It will never stop.
But yeah. Let us know also your own strategies and inspirations for how you name. But I believe that's it from us over at the Bone Pony Ranch. And hopefully you guys and gals have a great day. Bye.